Oh, you can do an intro video too.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. This is Ira Winkler with this week's session of um, the Cybersecurity Layoff Support Group. And in the first two sessions, what has happened is we've gone ahead and we've kind of laid the foundations for all of your, like what are your strengths, getting stock of where you are, how to go forward. And this week, I believe we're going to start to show how to begin to create action plans and take some actions towards moving forward. Hopefully a lot of you have, if nothing else, given like the people that have watched and everything, you're not alone. Hopefully you have overcome, I don't want to say the stigma, but hopefully you're starting to regain some of your confidence regarding being able to go ahead and understand where you are, understand that other people know where you are in your position, or just about everybody has been in your position. So there's, again, just start to take actions towards moving forward with the groundwork that we're laying. Anyway, with that in mind, I am here at Black Hat and I am going to bow out, and Steve is going to take control of the show himself. This is going to be, the rest of it is a solo session. Again, I thank Steve. And anyway, Steve, the stage is yours, including all the stage hands and everything like that. So
Right
if you
on.
could, yeah, you could take me out of presenting and I'm going to leave. So,
Oh, I think I just clicked them out. Hopefully that wasn't too early and too abrupt. But thanks everybody for joining in, and thanks Ira for again setting this up. We're going to get into some things today, building on what we did, as Ira mentioned, on the prior two sessions thus far. And so we're going to review those. But before we do, the next thing that we're moving into for today's session is two things that could essentially be their own learning courses in and of themselves, but goal setting and networking. So within this, I'm also going to be saying some things that are a bit possibly controversial in regards to goal setting, because we come at this from a performance psychology standpoint. So I know a lot of folks are big on SMART goals, the acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, etc., reachable, time frame based. We don't really follow those. And I'll get into why that is, but that's one of the controversial pieces that we'll get into today, because I know some people are live and die by the SMART acronym. We do not. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen in just a second here. And let me get this set up. Oop, don't want to hit that button. Sorry, just dealing with the configurations to make sure I do this correctly. I'm going to share this. So I am going to be hiding myself, I believe, if I can do this correctly. We're going to stick with this just in case so I don't goof it up. This is my first time running this, so I want to make sure I'm doing it correctly. As I mentioned, we're going to get into goal setting and networking today. So the idea is that this picture represents a CISO who's just made his way through the pile of work on his desk to be able to reach a goal of having accomplished all of this and now not having to work, or at least he's gotten through that pile of work. So I'm sure I was going to be sarcastic, but this is an ideal or a vision that most people that we engage strive for, and rarely ever do they achieve getting through the pile of work that they have to deal with. So jumping forward on this, just to give the background on what this group is, again, the Cybersecurity Layoff Support Group. This is really a value-added educational service that we're trying to provide to support the community in cybersecurity, because there's been a lot of layoffs, a lot of rifts, a lot of involuntary job change for folks. And so that leads to, or can lead to, a lot of just challenging mental and emotional responses to that. So opposed to leaning into the fears, the doubts, the anxieties, the frustrations, all of the things that make it harder for us experiencing these changes, we really want to help support and be that beacon of positivity and optimism and help you develop that mental resilience to continue to move forward in a way that actually empowers you opposed to beats you down. With that being said, we want to set the guidelines again. We do this every session to focus on the fact that, one, while this YouTube portion is more educational because of the challenge in having some interaction from a YouTube live standpoint, I will keep an eye as much as possible on the YouTube channel for any chats or any messages that come through. It's going to be a little bit challenging today, to be honest with it, because Ira would be my eyes and ears on that front. Him being at Black Hat, he's going to be not as engaged. No major issue on that front. He's got some other components that he's dealing with, but I'll try to support as best as possible. So confidentiality is going to be a challenge in this space. We will hold that in the Zoom session, and I'll send out a Zoom link for anybody that wants to join the Zoom to have more of a confidential engagement to talk about any of the activities we're going to go through today. Respect. We also want to make sure that if and when anybody is speaking, that they have the floor and no one's speaking over them. But we're also listening with curiosity and not judgment. So this idea that we're all here to learn and support each other, judgment interferes with that. We don't want to do that. And then it's also sharing and participating is voluntary. So if there's anything that you want to contribute, you are welcome to do so. There's also a beautiful aspect in participating in groups like this, where even when you're not contributing or sharing, you're still going to learn and take things away because you're hearing from other people's perspectives and experiences, which will benefit you as a whole. So for today, our objectives are to review sessions 1 and 2. We'll talk about that real briefly, but we want to get into goal setting and then also effective networking strategies. So those are the two primary things we're going to take away. So from an agenda standpoint, we would do a little check-in. I'm going to model some of this and be more like the educational teacher, so to speak. But we'll go through the check-ins. We'll talk about celebrating the wins. We'll review the prior 2 weeks, and then we'll get into the primary meat of this section this week. So jumping into it. From a check-in and win standpoint, we really want to find out what you were able to experience the prior week in regards to the activities. Last week, we talked about a personal compass statement. So that required us to really look at the values that are most important to each one of us. We went through an activity to help define some of those. And I also want to reiterate that it was a very, very quick, short session to be able to do that. Values, understanding what are the primary 3 to 5 values that really make up who you are, what you stand for, and that guide your words, thoughts, and your actions are extremely important, because oftentimes we get into a job, we start off with specific thoughts in mind or values and beliefs that we're doing this job because of these reasons. This is the stuff that I really gravitate to or drives me and motivates me internally to do the job that I'm seeking out to do. The challenge is when we get into the monotony and doing that job for a longer period of time, more than a year, whatever it is, the longer we're doing that job, the more that we get focused on the doing that job, what we're doing it, or what we're doing, how we're doing, and we can often lose sight of why we're doing the work that we're doing. So the idea here is to reflect back onto that and try to connect into those primary drivers for you, because that's the type of stuff that's going to create resilience and keep you going through the hard times. So in doing that, the personal compass statement is, I lean into this value because it does this for me. That's the general idea. It allows you to anchor back into what you have control over, who you are, and what really matters to you. That's the stuff that keeps you grounded when things become chaotic, unstable, being in the midst of a job change that you didn't choose to have happen, those types of things. So the idea then is, if perseverance, for example, is a core value for you, then how did you lean into that this past week, and what was a win associated with that? So I'll model this just to give you an idea of what it looks like and sounds like. But the idea is, for me, one of the biggest core values for me is to treat others the way that I want to be treated. So the golden rule, I want to be treated with kindness, with respect, with honesty. And so leaning into that, if I can pull from that one value of treating others the way I want to be treated, a variety of other values, but that's what I stand for. And so when somebody else is treating me in a way that goes against that, I do not stand for that. And so there's a variety of things that go into that. So treating others the way I want to be treated, a win for me this past week, even I'll say with CloudCon. So I spoke at CloudCon and run a couple tracks on stress management and burnout prevention. And I also provided, CloudCon was kind enough to buy our cybersecurity themed joke book, Bite Me. And so it was the first time that I've ever, one, published a book. Secondly, first time that I've ever done a book signing. So I felt a little maybe embarrassed, because for me, any book signings that I've seen previously were related to thick, really well drafted and crafted books that were hundreds of pages long. And I think of like Todd Fitzgerald, the former CISO who wrote the CISO Compass. That was a very labor intensive written book. That's the type of book that I've always envisioned people doing a book signing for. So a cybersecurity joke book, this gets into imposter syndrome a bit, but it's also an aspect of like, I really created that book as a means to showcase the fact that I believe cybersecurity professionals do important and critical work defending all of us in the public, and they don't get a lot of acknowledgement and recognition for the work and the value that they contribute. So that was the kind of driver behind that book, and that's a lot of how I want to be treated too and seen. And so I leaned into that and really just got a lot of joy out of people coming up to me and asking me to sign the book, and seeing them either laugh at the jokes or the cover of the book, or a little eye roll and groan. It's all part of the process. So I really enjoyed that. That's my celebrating. Conversely, this is one of the things that I do not enjoy, but it's a necessity for high performance, is accountability. I hate being held accountable, especially when I didn't follow through on something. It happens. And so there's things that get in the way. The reason that we bring up the second question of where did you struggle? For example, if my value was treating others the way that I want to be treated, if I treated somebody in a way that is not in alignment with that, if I was rude to somebody, or dishonest or unkind, that goes against my value. So being held accountable to that, and reflecting on what happened, what got in the way, and how could I better approach that situation going forward, is part of this process of really understanding we all make mistakes. We all, our energy might be low, we might be distracted, or whatever it is. There are things that get in the way. So if we can start to reflect on those and start to identify what made it hard, what got in the way, it's an opportunity for us to learn out of that situation, opposed to just have a mistake or a failure and take that personally and beat ourselves up. So for me, one of the things that got in the way is, I would say, so there was a friend's birthday party on Sunday, and so they had it at a beach on Lake Michigan, and so they did beach volleyball. I haven't played beach volleyball in 7 years. And so I was diving around. I'm 47 now. I thought I was going to break my body. And so for the 2 days following that beach volleyball event, I was extremely tired, extremely sore. And those things, when I'm not paying attention to it, lead me to not interacting well with other people. That includes my wife. So there was multiple occasions where I was a little short, or acted irritated. That goes against my value of treating others the way I want to be treated. So that's an opportunity to look at, okay, in that moment, what could I do to help offset or be more mindful of how I'm showing up in that aspect? And then I can go into, well, it'd probably be helpful for me to prep myself when I'm going to interact with her, to make sure that, one, I'm either communicating, hey, I'm sore and tired, I'm not feeling that great, so I apologize if I'm not communicating in a way or interacting with you that is ideally how I would otherwise want to be acting. But it gives me an opportunity to continue to build that relationship. So that's the model for that. So this is how we would go through these types of sessions: is the check-in, celebrating a win, because that boosts confidence, that engages people and showcases some positivity, and putting focus on things actually rewires our brains to look for that positive aspect of things, which is what we're all about here. So what we did over the past first two sessions was we went through, first and foremost, the personal support plan, as I mentioned, talking about the fact that oftentimes when we get in these modes of, there's an aspect, like I just mentioned, of feeling embarrassed or ashamed for having been let go from a job. There's an aspect where our identities can be tied into our jobs and our titles and the work that we're doing, but also knowing that you are not your job. A job is more of a medium to execute on the values that really make up who you are. So it's the what and the how to your why from a Simon Sinek standpoint. So we went into that personal support plan. Last week, we also developed those values. So who are you? What are the values that make up your words, thoughts, and your actions? Because the quality of our lives are dictated by the choices and decisions we make, which impact our behaviors. So we went into those, and that leads us into today. I love this picture. One, because it's funny and silly. It makes me laugh anytime I see this picture. But today we're going to focus on starting with this concept of the ABC resilience model. So what is this? When we think about resilience, it's our ability to bounce back from any challenges we're experiencing. So first and foremost, it's a simple process. And if you haven't seen the prior two series that we've conducted thus far, we are all about having simple, pragmatic, actionable things that everybody can take away to start to practice on a daily basis. These are not big lifts. These are not challenging concepts. We keep things simple because complexity leads to confusion and inability to execute. We don't want that. We want to be able to take action and focus on the things we have control over, which is also a big theme for us in terms of what we do. So in this aspect, the resilience model here, the ABC resilience model, we start with activating your strengths. As I mentioned, we already went through the values that we really hold dear and important to us, the things that we believe in, that make up who we are, what we stand for. So understanding what those strengths or values are, trying to figure out how can you lean into those. So that's first and foremost. Picking a specific strength that you can focus on daily, that you can utilize to lean on as your anchor, which is highlighted in the second bullet point here, is being able to build up keystone habits. These are the things that do not change, and it takes a good 6 to 8 weeks. It's different for everybody, but the idea is it takes consistent practice and repetition to build up a habit. I'll also note here that a lot of the times we have this self-defeating, self-sabotaging voice in our heads. Everybody has it. It's if you've ever heard the idea that we're our own worst critics, because we're constantly having this brain that from a survival instinct standpoint really leans into negative thoughts, negative viewpoints and perspectives. And that's just a habit. It's just something that we've told ourselves over and over again. So identifying that habit when we're self-defeating and self-sabotaging is really important. We can also offset that by leaning into this ABC resilience model. So once you've identified a strength or a value that you want to lean on for the week, then building that into your daily and weekly habits. So we'll get into an example in here in a second. I just want to highlight the three main points to this. And then the last part, like we just did in the check-in, was to celebrate your progress. So how will you track your wins and then reward yourself? If, much like me, if you are a fan of the old TV series Twin Peaks, Agent Cooper was sitting in the diner there in Twin Peaks. The sheriff came in and they were supposed to go somewhere, but Agent Cooper was having coffee and a donut. And he turned to the sheriff and said, he makes sure to treat himself kindly at least one time a day. And so he does that by having a donut, which I totally relate to because I love the donuts too. But the idea is it could just simply be an acknowledgement, right? And thinking about how good it feels to have accomplished that small little win, because the more that you look for those, the more you start to rewire your brain to look for those positive wins, and it leads to more optimism. It's also a self-confidence booster as well. So with that being said, what I want to do is get into this concept of discussing what this looks like. So it's a very simple thing. We'll go into the Zoom session after this to really get into it with anybody that wants to have a personal discussion around this and create this concept. But for me, again, it could be an aspect of kindness, that being one of my core values. So if I want to lean into that from a daily and weekly habit, then I would want to make sure that I prioritize having at least one moment of kindness with the people that are closest to me. So I can measure that on a daily basis of I have a 22-year-old daughter, a 19-year-old daughter, and a 15-year-old son in the house. So how can I show up every day and exhibit kindness to them, which is going to be a relationship building focus for me, which is really important as a parent to them. I want to have a great relationship with them. So with all that being said, how can I track that? One of the things that I do is I have a check-in in the morning in terms of how am I feeling? What's my energy level like? What are the feelings or emotions that I'm feeling in the morning? And then the idea is how am I going to show up throughout the day, leaning into kindness? And then at the end of the evening, as I'm getting ready for bed, I have a whole routine, which includes just reflecting on how did I execute on that value. It doesn't take very long. It takes 2 to 3 minutes for me to go through and be like, did I show up and execute on that, or what got in the way? And if you notice, the words that I use are really, really important to identify. One, I'm not saying what mistake did I make, how did I fail at that thing, because those are really negative connotations. There's judgment applied to those things, and it's an easy way to then start to beat myself up if those are the words that I'm using. However, if you change that wording, so there's a reframe to that. If you change the wording from did I achieve that or did I fail? If you change the wording into what got in the way for me achieving that or executing, that becomes a much more empowering way to look at it as a way to learn and grow. And that's more empowering. That's a high performance mindset. So with that being said, that's the state of this. So very simple. I'm going to also try to make sure that I have the YouTube channel up and going as well. So I apologize just for a minute for those that are watching. We want to make sure that I'm catching this accurately. There we go. All right. So I don't see anything in the chat thus far. If there's anybody that wants to start interacting on the chat, please feel free to give it a shot. And I'm just going to add one thing. All right. So I kick things off. Awesome. Let's move to the next thing now. So we're going to get into goal setting. As I mentioned, this might come off as, I don't know if provocative or controversial are the right words behind this. But I practiced a lot of the SMART goal setting over the years. There's some benefit to it in terms of that timeline and being specific and measuring it, because we're going to incorporate some of those into this concept. But for us as performance psychology professionals, we take a different approach. First and foremost, in the middle of this slide is a circle that says control the controllables. One of my idols in the performance psychology domain is a gentleman by the name of Ken Ravizza. Ken was big on this concept of controlling the controllables. He worked with John Madden, might be say the football name out of this, but the idea that the former Major League Baseball coach for the Los Angeles Angels, now the Anaheim Angels, the Tampa Rays, and the Chicago Cubs, Madden got the Cubs to win the World Series, and Ravizza was part of their staff. And so he had a very simple approach to all of these things, much like I do. This idea, though, that oftentimes when we get frustrated, irritated, annoyed, when we're not our best, it's often because we're focusing on things that we don't have control over. When we do that, we try to squeeze and control more, and it makes things worse. So instead of doing that, taking our focus back into what we actually have control over, because that is a very small amount of things. We have control over our attitude, our effort, our energy, the way that we choose to respond to any given situation or stimulus, the way that we choose to think, the way that we choose to talk, the way that our body language. Outside of that, there's very little that we have control over. And so the concept behind this is that we want to get into a few components here. First and foremost, much like any map, I've got listed in the lower left-hand corner here a red circle that shows where you are right now in the moment. On the far end of this staircase here is your goal. Wherever you want to get to is the focus that we want to have, right? So one, we believe in big, audacious goals, but this could also be just like I gave up front. I just want to have a goal of building good relationships with my family. And so on a daily basis, what's a small thing that I can do, right? Focusing on that kindness piece. So when we get into this, I want to talk about here what this actually means from a performance psychology standpoint. So what we're going to look at is a couple of different things. First and foremost is what we call process goals. Process goals are specific actions and behaviors you can engage in to improve your performance. You have control over these things. I'll give some examples in a second, but the second thing we want to focus on outside of process goals is performance goals. These are goals that you can focus on in achieving personal standards of performance, regardless of the outcome. Again, things that you have control over. The challenge here is that a lot of organizations and a lot of people put all of the focus on what's the ultimate goal, what's the outcome you're trying to achieve. The issue with that is that we oftentimes don't have full control over that outcome. So if we don't have full control over that outcome, and we just said that oftentimes when we put our focus on trying to control things we don't have control over, like that outcome, any little goof, any little slip, any little mistake is seen as something that is putting that outcome at risk. So then you have a lot more fear, doubt, anxiety that increase, opposed to empowering feelings like positivity, optimism, resilience, action, effort, all of the things that you control, right? So we want to look at one, when we set a goal, we want to make sure, similar to those SMART goals that we would set, that we want to make it specific. We also want to make sure we can measure it. We want to make sure that there's a timeline component, but we also want to make sure that our focus goes into those things that we can control, which is our process goals and performance goals. Third then becomes the outcome goals. These goals are the focus. These goals focus on the end result. So from our standpoint, and I don't have this listed here, but it's good to note this if you're a note taker. One is we want to put 20% roughly of our focus on that outcome goal. That's our guiding light. We want to make sure that we're in that right direction. I often think about this as like if you're climbing a mountain, if you're at the base of the mountain, the outcome goal is the top of the mountain. You might start up a certain path and then you might get blocked, right? So that means you might have to take a lateral movement. You might have to take a different approach. You might have to back up, go back to the start and find a different path up, but you'll start to learn as you go whether or not you're on the right path or not, right? So ultimately, keeping the vision on the top of the mountain or that outcome goal, 20% of the focus needs to be there, but the majority of the focus, 80%, needs to be focused on the process and performance goals because that's what you have control over, right? Now, getting into an actual example of what this looks like, if you're interested, I can send you a worksheet that outlines all this stuff so you can start to fill it out on your own. But the idea here is one, starting with the actual date where you're filling this out, you're going to select a core value. So we highlighted those again in the values and the personal compass statements that we created previously. But the idea here is for Jordan selected perseverance as their core value. The process goal, the action that Jordan can control, is Jordan can spend 10 minutes each morning practicing their 30-second strength snapshot pitch, which we're going to get into in a second, in front of a mirror. The beauty of this is one, if you just go through this, create your snapshot or your strength snapshot pitch, which is going to be leading into our networking component. If you just write it down and you don't practice it, you're going to fumble through it. You're going to forget certain things, and it's not going to come off as certain and confident as you would like it to be. When two people come together, the one that is more certain is going to have more influence on the other. And so this is what we want to get into, opposed to if you are somebody that has been in between jobs for a long period of time, and now you're frustrated, you're irritated, you're starting to feel some desperation for whatever reason. Finances, your family's judging you, or whatever it is, you're judging yourself as not good enough, or whatever it is. That desperation does not attract people. That is uncertainty and fear and instability. We do not want to be operating that way. In order to attract what we want, we have to be certain and confident. So, with that being said, the process goal being what you can control, Jordan then has a pre-performance routine, which I'm very big on. So pre-performance routines just get you ready to execute on the thing that you're going to do in the moment, right? So for me, I have a morning routine where I'll get up in the morning and I have a whole routine to go exercise, meditate, journal, and then I'm prepped and ready mentally to take on my day and execute on my goals. This also includes a pre-performance routine if you're going to have an interview, if you are going to network, if you are going to be showing up just in your personal life and you want to make sure that you are being the best spouse, partner, friend, whatever it is, taking a small moment just to regroup yourself, ground, be as present as possible and as intentional as possible for that thing that you're going to do is really, really important. Most people I know do not do this, but it is a major performance increaser. So for Jordan's pre-performance routine is to immediately after their first cup of coffee is stand by their home office whiteboard. So I have one right in front of me and listing out one, their values, but also what are they going to achieve today and work on from that process goal. They then line out their performance goal, the metric to track, getting into that SMART component, delivering their strengths snapshot pitch to 3 people this week. For them, that can be a video call or in person. That's a typo. But they've given themselves a date to achieve those 3 contacts and that pitch to 3 people by the end of the week. The last thing is the outcome goal. Again, this is the top of the mountain, what they're aiming for. And so they want to secure at least one informational interview or coffee chat next week. So all of that is something that this doesn't take a lot of time to put together. It might be a little challenging when you first start working through this to be as specific and I guess narrow focused, so to speak, or detailed within that as possible. And then the other big thing here is that from a note standpoint, they included use feedback from each delivery from those 3 snapshot pitches to refine the wording and boost their confidence. So I put that in there specifically because of the fact for a lot of us, this may be a little bit different, a little bit new, but what we're trying to do is also get you outside of your comfort zone. Nothing awesome happens sitting in your comfort zone and just doing the things that you've done over and over again. Einstein's definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So what we want to do is experiment with this, give yourself permission to test this out, because Brene Brown also has a great concept of the acronym being FFT, first freaking time. Different F word could be used in the middle there, but the idea is that anytime we try something new or different, we're typically not going to be great at it. We're probably going to suck. But the idea is that the more that we practice and learn and understand what's working and what's not, we can grow and get better at that thing. And that's what this is. So we want to start testing out and doing instead of overthinking, analysis, paralysis, procrastination, whatever. The moment we have a thought that we need to do it, do it. So now that we covered the goal setting piece of it, and I know that was pretty quick, the idea here is that we want to move into this aspect of now putting it into action through networking. Being the stress management professional that I am, there are 3 different types of stress. Eustress is the positive component of a stress. We all need stress to take any action as human beings, but stress is a response. Eustress is when you are doing something where the outcome actually is more positive than the effort you have to put into it, the negatives associated with that thing. So that could be starting a new job, going out on a first date, trying a new hobby, networking. For some can be a eustress component. For others, it can get into distress from an acute standpoint. Acute is short term, momentary, resolves itself pretty quickly. Networking is not always an easy aspect for people, myself included. So I may sound sociable and engaging, but I am an introvert. I lose my energy in social engagements or activities. And so I need some downtime to be alone to recharge and recoup in order to build my energy back up. Extroverts expend their energy when they're alone, they get energy when they're in social environments. So, that being said, understanding where you fit, and it's not all or nothing. If you're an extrovert, doesn't mean you don't have introvert capacity or traits. It's which one's more dominant for you, because we do have the ability to pull from one and act as another and learn more from those, but it's an aspect of like, what's your default? So with that being said, networking oftentimes, and the next slide we'll get into this, is there is so much in regards to people wanting to take and being a very self-centered view. Cybersecurity is an industry rife with this. But the idea is, especially if you want to build relationships, if you want to have a long-term sustainable view on how you're operating in the industry, and if you want to just genuinely connect with people, you have to give. That's the single default component for networking. So there's an aspect we're going to focus on give and gain with our networking strategies for this one. And so, as I mentioned, traditional networking, typically transactional and more focused on one person that wants to network as taking. What can I get from you? What can you do for me? That is not an approach that endears yourself to other people. It shows that you really don't care about the other person. You have your own agenda. And so you're just focused on yourself. What we want to focus on in this give and gain model is going opposite. We want to give before even asking anything. This takes a little preparation work. It doesn't have to be exhaustive, but the idea is we want to be able to find ways that we can, one, engage with others in a way that's actually giving to them and showing that we have no other agenda. And there will be skepticism, but we have primary agenda is really to connect and get to know somebody else. So there's a few examples here listed in the give category. So one is sharing an article on technology trend, you know, that they care about. AI is a big forefront right now in terms of the tech space. And I've seen a lot of articles talking about the downsides of tech, the upsides of tech, and all these things. But it could simply be on LinkedIn. If you're wanting to network and connect with people, when they post something, have a thoughtful response or comment to their post on LinkedIn. It's a really easy way to show that you took time to read what their post was, especially if it's an article. And if there's something in there that resonates with you or jumps out at you as a nugget, then sharing that is like, you know what, I thought this was really interesting. I hadn't thought about it this way. Or have you considered this different thought process related to that? Whatever it is, it starts a dialogue, right? So you're not taking, you're giving. That's the second post, is the offering the feedback on a recent post. I don't like the word feedback. I included it in here because depending on how you interpret this, feedback, I'm not saying criticize the post. I'm saying respond in a way that's showing some care and thought in regards to what they posted. That shows that you actually took time, and time is the only asset that we have that we can't get back. So this aspect of you took time out of your day to be thoughtful and respond in a way that showed that, it's a big deal. And especially in networking, I tend to, when I network, I don't like asking people what they do. I've done it many times, but it just doesn't land in the way that builds relationship in a way that I would like to. So I really want to get to know somebody individually, and that builds relationship. So instead of asking, what do you do? Finding something else to ask of like, hey, if you go to a networking event and you've done some research ahead of time to see who might be there and who you might want to contact, that's a good way to see what they post and what's of interest to them. And one, you can bring a thought from one of their posts into that networking event and say, oh, hey, I'm really glad I ran into you. I thought your one post was really interesting. Or I saw that you're a fan of golf or baseball or whatever it is. That becomes a thing that you can immediately build some rapport with by saying, hey, what do you think of this trade that was made? Or like, who's one of your favorite baseball players? I used to be a huge Cubs fan of the 80s and 90s because my dad was. So Ryan Sandberg, one of my all-time great favorites. The challenge for me now is that I don't know anybody on the Cubs team. So I'd have to do some engagement and start watching some of the baseball coverage in order to know anything about that. But there may be something about right now is Black Hat. So if there's an event next week in your town, finding out, hey, did you go to Black Hat? What stood out to you there? I'd really like to know, right? I'm not going to Black Hat, obviously. So those are ways to give. And again, the idea is being selfless and putting the focus on the other person. And part of the challenge also is that you have to really commit to that and mean it. The more that you can do that, and I had one of the coolest experiences a couple of years ago. A performance psychologist that I really look up to was at a conference. And so I had the opportunity to speak with him. He's a big name in the industry. And so I figured that he would not want to have anything to do with me and that his attention span really wouldn't be fixed on me. So I went over to introduce myself and just thank him for the content that he puts out online. And then also I knew something about some of the work that he does. And I said, I'm doing some similar work. Here's what I do. I've never had anyone provide the amount of attention that he did to me. His eyes were locked on me the entire time. There was all kinds of stuff going on around us and people. Not once did his gaze leave my eyesight. He was locked in, and it felt like to me, it felt like I was the most important person in the world to him. And I've never had that experience with anybody else. It was a level of attention that I try to emulate. I still don't know how to fully do it because it felt like a Jedi mind trick, but it was amazing. So focusing on the give. And the second piece is, we're going to work through this in just a second, but the idea is when you are seeking something, when you build that rapport, the other person is going to want to ask you, like, what's going on with you? What can I do for you? Right? So if there's a way that you can help them first by introducing them to somebody else, that's a great way to go. Secondly is the gain. So once you give, you have the opportunity then, if you've got some conversation going, to say, hey, I'm looking for some help. I'm wondering if you could help me. So the gain would be, can you get a referral? Asking for some career advice, right? That's an easy way to say, hey, I haven't been in the job market for a while, or I have, whatever it is, but would you be willing to take a look at my resume to see if you think there could be any improvement done to it, right? It's a very simple ask. And then third, adding a new connection to your network and just saying, hey, I really appreciated the conversation. Would you be willing to connect on LinkedIn with me? Done. It's a pretty non-threatening way to engage with somebody, especially if you just had a conversation that connected with them. That connection request is not a big ask. So those are the three things that we would get into. Now, so this strengths snapshot that I just mentioned, this is the outline for it. The idea is we've already done the work now to understand what are the main values that you really make up who you are and what you stand for. So first and foremost, from an introduction and networking standpoint, this may sound weird. I don't know if everybody gets into this, but again, giving yourself permission to test this out, because what you're going to find is once you start doing this a few times, you'll start to learn what's working for you, what's natural for you, and then what's not. And you can refine this. So the idea is we start with, hi, I'm Steve. My compass is treating others the way I want to be treated. Moving into a strength highlight, and I've achieved, or I get to help people manage stress and be their best selves. That's in alignment with my compass, right? The give then is, I'd love to share the state of stress report with you. That's my own little plug, but that's our research we just did on CISO stress and burnout. And I'd love to share that with you as a resource. And then providing an ask, would you be interested in learning more or maybe having a private debrief? It's a pretty simple 30-second pitch, right? So from a networking standpoint, you could go through all those steps. I also really enjoy just going into that aspect of like, hey, my name is this. My compass is perseverance. I've experienced this that demonstrates this. And I'd really like to understand, how does that align with you? What have you experienced with that? Putting it back on them, asking an open-ended question allows that other person to talk and share something about themselves. That's what builds rapport, relationship, and then allows you to say, you know what, this is great. I really enjoyed connecting with you. Would you mind if we connect on LinkedIn? That could be an easy 30-second pitch. So once we've got that down, I'm going to put you to work and suggest that you put this into play yourself. So the connection challenge, the networking dare that we want to focus on for this week, pretty simple. I'm going to challenge you or dare you to reach out to 2 people in your network or your extended network that gets in your personal support plan using your strengths snapshot. Lead with a genuine give, like I've highlighted. That is not an exhaustive list. So if there's other gives that you can think of, give it a shot. But share an article, ask a question, or offer some response to their post. Again, I say feedback here, but it's more so what's your thought in regards to those things. And then I want you to track and log each outreach in your networking dare tracker, however you want to track it, the date, the person, what you gave, and what you gained or hope to gain. And then then next week, we're going to touch on that with the check-ins to find out how you did. I want to find out, 1, what the experience was like for you, what you gained or did not gain, and then what you think got in the way or what you could refine for next time. So that's what we're going to focus on. Here's your dare. Give it a shot. And that's pretty much it for this week. So with this, I'm going to make sure that we open up a Zoom link for everybody to join. I'm going to put it in the YouTube chat right now. Bear with me. Say, please join the confidential Zoom session for further discussion. All right. So thank you all very much. This wraps up week 3 in the session here on goal setting and networking. I know that these can be built out into multiple different components for each one of those for networking and goal setting. However, we want to give you some immediate skills that you can start to use. So let me know what you think. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn, or if you're available to join us for the Zoom section next, I'll have that open until 11:30 Central. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in any way that we can support you. Thank you very much.